Today, a much better day out in Europe. The FTSE 100 had even calamitously fallen around 9% at the start of trade yesterday. Today, making up some of those gains, not necessarily moving up by as much as it lost yesterday, but at least, as I said earlier, increasingly getting slightly better. Perhaps it's just a slight reprieve and things could get worse. Of course, just how things fare when it comes to the coronavirus and its spread will determine just how far markets go, because growth prospects become very important as well for these countries. That's London, Germany, and France. Let's check in on the local index. Well, there's some positivity there too. Of course, yesterday we saw the JSE suffer its worst day since the 2008 financial crisis. So a massive fall there, with many stocks such as Sasol really seeing big falls. 47 billion rand wiped off of Sasol's share price there. So big falls when it comes to that. 46.5% out of its share price. That share ending the day yesterday around 86 rand. Its worst levels as well since around 2006. So it does tell you the story of just how bad yesterday was. But again, let's remember that it's not just the coronavirus on its own that played into the market yesterday. The dispute and the feud between Russia and Saudi Arabia, of course, the biggest producers of oil, certainly did play into the market, seeing that oil price go right down to around $31 a barrel, with the WTI, that's the intermediate, then going down to around $27 a barrel as well. So it really does tell you the story. Global markets perhaps a little bit more fearful, and perhaps it is a time for a breather. Do not let a good crisis go to waste, because if things go down, it's the perfect opportunity to buy and take them higher. For now, we're back above 50,000 points for the all share, with the gold indices still remaining that safe haven for investors, and those gold shares seemingly continue to do well also in a time of need. The platinum counters, though, are back below $55, 55 points, should I say. That's about 25% lower than its peak of around 75 odd as well. Having seen that happen a little bit earlier this year, the resources overall not necessarily seeing a good picture. Let's check in on the commodity front. So the gold counter is a little bit lower today. That has been the safe haven that investors have shifted to. But as you can tell, with markets perhaps shifting slightly back today with that reprieve, it does mean they've pulled their money out of the commodity itself and gone back into a few more of the assets. Platinum also headed higher, while the Brent crude price now at $37 a barrel. That's a big increase, considering that yesterday we sat at $30 a barrel odd, somewhere there. It's more than 7% gained today thus far, and a good mark for the oil prices that hopefully gets to some sense of stability. Perhaps Russia and Saudi Arabia get back to the negotiating table. That is going to be the question in mind now. Onto the currency front, we saw the local index hit 16 Rand 80 against the US dollar at some point in the last 24 hours. But luckily, we've gotten some sense of perhaps sanity returning to the market somewhat. If that really is the place to be for the South African currency is yet to be seen. Of course, we've lost as much as 1 Rand and 80 cents this year alone. The local currency started 2020 at 14 Rand against the US dollar. Many hopes that it would decline, but of course the dispute between the US and Iran, and now of course with the coronavirus sentiment and Russia and Saudi Arabia getting into their feud, it does change just where the rand is at fair value. We also saw Moody's downgrade South Africa's growth from 0.7 to 0.4%. That certainly plays into the market picture and just how things fare when it comes to the currency predominantly as well. But it did decrease the growth prospects, that's Moody's of course, of the G20 nations. So not much to really look at and say it is just a South Africa factor. But that does mean that we're expected to get a growth level similar to that of 2019, 0.4%, not really accounting for much. We could be in a recession for a little bit longer. South Africa, 1772 for a euro, 2062 for a pound. Here's a look then at all the other currencies as well within the BRICS nations and just how things fare at present. Still some positivity there as well. Let's head on over then to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Kabelo Tula is standing by then there from FNB Wealth and Investment as we unpack this market picture. As you sat at your desk yesterday, seeing the calamitous fall, what were your thoughts?
No, very good afternoon. Look, it was a hectic day. There was panic throughout. The moves were aggressive. And it was really, as you mentioned, not seen since 2008. And I think a lot of people just pressed the sell button, and there was no way, no comparison to it rather than going back to 2008. So a terrible day throughout.
Yeah. Would you liken yesterday to that, that time, or would we really need to see more sustained sort of selling over a number of days, really, in a downward trajectory? Do you think that yesterday resembled anything like 2008, 2009?
I think this year and this particular incident has, it seems a slightly more orderly. 2008 was the height of the global financial crisis, which was a credit crunch, really, and we weren't too sure about the strength of the financial institutions that borrow and lend money. And currently now we're talking about a virus, yes, which we don't have too much idea of where it stems from and how severe it can be. And obviously now the impact, I think, will come out with regards to us being a globalized nation. Are we going to be able to continue trade the way that we have in the past? Is there going to be cash flow? And I think now that risk is slowly starting to materialize in the markets. Hence you saw days like yesterday.
Yeah. Was it too broad a sell-off yesterday? Was it just a bit too much? Was it overplayed and the market saying to itself, yeah, let's correct that a little bit?
I think that's what you're seeing today. I think you're seeing, for circuit breakers to kick in at the US Open, it was quite severe. And I think today the authorities had to come in, make a statement, and as you mentioned, there's going to be a global-wide effort to try and bolster the economies of most emerging and developed countries. And today you're seeing a breather. But if you ask me, I don't think we are anywhere out of the woods just yet.
Yeah, and the problem with not being out of the woods is you still get tentative buyers, tentative sellers, of course, and the market structure sort of continues to sit in limbo almost. Do you find that we're still running away from equities and headed into gold, platinum, or rather gold and gold stocks, those safe havens?
Absolutely. I think if you have a close look at the gold price, it's not really pulling back as sufficiently as one would think if we were in a risk-off environment. If we were in a risk-off environment, or rather a risk-on environment, you'd also see the rand strengthening slightly over and above the 2% odd that you saw leading up to about now. But I think there will be further risk. It continues to be there, and I wouldn't be surprised to see us back above 16 on the rand at some point in the medium term.
We did close off at 1608 then last night, though. Now we're at 1581 odd. Where is the benchmark for the rand here? Where is the most sustainable place? Or do we just hope and pray that we don't go to 17 and it doesn't get any worse?
No, I think it's beyond hoping and praying. I think there's certain measures that play in our favor. For one of our largest imports, which is fuel, has just become 30% cheaper. Yeah. We need to take good advantage of that. We probably need to communicate a bit more from a government perspective and say some of the measures we're taking, these are some of the implementation steps that we'd like to see. Yeah. And I don't think a 15 rand 50, even a 14.90 is out of the question. But of course, a lot of it doesn't sit within our hands. There's there's obviously the rating agencies. There's a global context where we know the South African rand tends to get sold off quite a bit whenever there's perceived risk in the market. Yeah. All right.
Let's quickly talk equities then very quickly. First, Rand, in the midst of all of this, releasing their set of earnings. One would have thought, having seen the likes of Standard Bank suffer a little bit, that, things are really, really bad. But First Rand seemingly coming out and not doing so bad themselves.
No, not too bad on the surface of it, and obviously the outlook, I think, somewhat muted. Our CEO mentioning that the outlook doesn't look too bright, but the numbers were fair. 5% increase in profitability. F&B being a large part of the bank still showing positive growth, positive momentum.
Yeah.
RMB also doing quite well. And I think the businesses that have come into the fore, into the stable, being synergized quite well as well.
Yeah, do you think you'll get the same out of ABSA tomorrow?
Oh, it's difficult to say because the market is very tight, and I think one has to obviously look at the operating model, and the level of competition that's out there is intense. And activity, you might find, has slowed down in terms of transaction, in terms of lending, on the back of just global concerns and a muted domestic economy. But yes, good luck to them.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, Kabelo, appreciate the time. Thank you so much for that. Kabelo Tola there from FNB Wealth and Investment, joining us live from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, helping us unpack that market movement. It's Daniel Minele's first interim results presentation that we get to have a chat with him about tomorrow. We'll get to chat to the former Reserve Bank Deputy Governor about the year, about what he sees happening for the bank, where to from here. For ABSA, as well as it, of course, rebranded as well across 7 different countries on the continent. So we'll unpack that. At the same time, we also have MTN's numbers coming out tomorrow as well. What that means is Nigeria played a very big part in their profitability, but Nigeria may also break them. S&P, the ratings agency, coming out yesterday and saying that it will be able or will not be able to continuously grow as a company if they continue to increase their stake or their presence out in Nigeria, because unfortunately the oil saga that has played out very recently may break the company a little bit further down the line. It gets very interesting. We'll have those results for you, of course, live here on SABC News. Let's take a quick